You ever have one of those nights where you don't even plan to go out, but somehow you end up drunk on a Tuesday, sitting in a dive bar downtown with your head spinning and your phone at 3%? That was me last month. It had been a rough day. Work was chaos. My laptop crashed in the middle of a deadline, and then my manager dumped another project on me like I wasn't already drowning. By the time 7 p.m. rolled around, I needed a drink more than I needed dinner. So I stopped into this grimy little bar near my apartment, the kind with sticky floors, too loud music, and cheap whiskey. I didn't expect to see anyone I knew. And I definitely didn't expect him to walk in. When I looked up and saw my boss, I nearly choked on my drink. David. That was his name. I'd known it since my first interview at the agency. He was the kind of guy who made a room go quiet when he walked in. Not because he demanded it, but because something about him just carried. Mid-30s, crisp white shirts, black hair, graying at the temples in a way that made him look even better. Smart, no nonsense, always calm even when the rest of us were scrambling. And yeah, I'd thought about him, more than I should have. But he was my boss. And I was just another overworked junior copywriter, trying to survive. When he spotted me sitting alone, his brow furrowed slightly. He walked over, hands in his pockets. "This where you vanished to after work?" he asked, voice low and smooth, like he wasn't surprised to see me there at all. I blinked, not sure if I should stand or sink further into the booth. Kind of. I didn't think anyone else from work came around here. I don't, he said simply, but I had a meeting nearby. He looked me over. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. Not from the alcohol. Not entirely. "You all right?" he asked. "Yeah. Just needed to get out of my head for a bit." David nodded, then did something I didn't expect. He sat down across from me. I stared at him, unsure of what to say. He loosened his tie, waved over the bartender, and ordered something neat. Something expensive, I'm sure. "You don't have to entertain me," I said, suddenly self-conscious. He raised an eyebrow. "I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here because I didn't like the idea of one of my team drinking alone, looking like someone just punched him in the gut." I didn't know how to respond to that. So I took another sip and said, "Fair enough." We sat in silence for a bit. Then he asked, "What happened?" I laughed under my breath. Where do I start? I told him about the laptop crash, the late edits, the new assignment dropped on me last minute. I kept it professional, tried to make it sound like I was venting, not breaking down. But he just listened, really listened. No interruptions, no judgment. Eventually he said, "I'll talk to Amanda about the workload. You shouldn't be expected to do two people's jobs." It was such a simple thing, but hearing him say it made my throat tighten. I looked away. "You should head home," he added after a moment. "Want me to get you an Uber?" "My phone's dead," I admitted. "I'll walk." He frowned at that. "No chance. It's late, and you're clearly not walking straight." "I'm fine. I'll take you." I froze. "Wait, like you?" He stood up. "Yes, me." I followed him out of the bar, heart pounding in my chest. In the car, it was quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't uncomfortable, but loaded. I could feel him glance at me when we hit a red light. "You really weren't planning on calling anyone, were you?" he asked. "Nope." He shook his head. "You've got to stop thinking you're on your own." That hit harder than I expected. We pulled up in front of my building, but before I could thank him and bolt, he put the car in park and turned toward me. "You sure you're okay getting upstairs?" I nodded, though the world tilted just slightly when I moved. "Yeah, thanks." But he didn't move. He just sat there, watching me. And then he said it. "Do you want me to come up?" I stared at him, brain short-circuiting. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what I was supposed to say. But I knew what I wanted. And against every rule, every line we weren't supposed to cross, I nodded. That was the night everything changed. The thing about saying yes to something you know you probably shouldn't, it happens fast. Too fast to take back. He didn't hesitate. David killed the engine and stepped out of the car without a word, walking around to open my door like this was the most natural thing in the world. The street was quiet. Just the buzz of a neon sign and the distant hum of traffic somewhere off in the city. I got out and felt the chill hit me all at once. Or maybe it wasn't the air. Maybe it was the sudden realization of what I'd just agreed to. David followed me into the lobby. I caught a glimpse of us in the mirrored wall by the elevators. Him in his dark button-down, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and me, still in my wrinkled work clothes, swaying a little from too much cheap whiskey. When the elevator doors opened, we stepped in together. It was a short ride, but the silence stretched in every direction. I leaned against the wall for balance. He stood beside me, hands in his pockets, his reflection sharp and unreadable. "This the part where I pretend this is still a professional interaction?" I said, trying to cut the tension. He gave a small laugh. That line got blurred the second I walked into that bar. The doors opened. I fumbled, with my keys at the door, my fingers clumsy. David didn't rush me, didn't offer to help. He just stood behind me, quiet, steady. Inside, the apartment was dim, lit only by the city lights bleeding through the windows. I dropped my bag by the door and turned to face him. He didn't move. Not until I did. I took a step closer. And another. And then, we were standing barely a foot apart, our eyes locked. I didn't know what I expected in that moment. A kiss? A goodbye? A lecture about boundaries? But David just looked at me like he was trying to decide if this was real. If I was real. "You sure about this?" he asked, voice low. I should have said no. I should have backed away, thanked him for the ride, laughed it off. I should have done 100 things differently. But I didn't. Instead, I reached out and hooked a finger into the hem of his shirt. "Yeah," I said, "I'm sure." That was all it took. The next second, his hand was on the back of my neck, pulling me in. His mouth met mine like we'd been building up to this for years, not days, not hours. It wasn't rushed or clumsy. It was careful, focused, like he was memorizing me. We stumbled back toward the living room, our hands everywhere, tugging at buttons, sliding under fabric. I felt his fingers at the back of my shirt, lifting it over my head, and suddenly the cold air hit my skin, grounding me just enough to realize what was happening. This was David, my boss, in my apartment, kissing me like I was the only thing that made sense in the world. It didn't feel real. But when his hands found my waist, his thumbs pressing into the sides of my skin, I knew it was. Every nerve in my body lit up, my breath hitching as I pressed closer, needing more. We made it to the couch, barely. Clothes kept disappearing. Time got weird. I wasn't drunk anymore, not like I had been earlier. I was buzzed in a new way, drunk on the heat between us, on the weight of his body, the feel of his mouth trailing down my chest. And just when I thought I couldn't take it, when the tension in my body was screaming for release, he pulled back, breathing hard, his forehead resting against mine. "I shouldn't be here," he whispered. I nodded. "I know. But I don't want to leave." I looked up at him. The air between us was charged, but softer now. He looked less like my boss, and more like a man trying to make sense of what he was feeling. "Then don't," I said. "Not yet." His eyes searched mine for a moment longer. Then he kissed me again. This time, slower, more certain. And the night didn't end for a long, long time. When I woke up, the sun was already pushing through the blinds, throwing slices of warm light across the sheets. I blinked slowly, my body still heavy, my head a little foggy. And for a moment, I forgot where I was, or maybe who I was last night. Then I turned over and saw him. David was lying beside me, shirtless, the sheets pulled low across his waist. His eyes were still closed, one arm tucked under the pillow, the other resting loosely near my side. His breathing was steady, peaceful. I just stared for a while. It's a strange thing, seeing someone who usually exists in a sharply dressed, always put together context suddenly vulnerable and quiet, asleep in your bed. I'd never seen him like this. No tie, No stern expression, no clipboard of deadlines or edits to discuss. Just him, my boss, in my bed. I laid there frozen, trying to process everything. I should have been panicking, right? I mean, how the hell do you go back to pretending everything's normal at work after this? But as I watched him sleep, I didn't feel regret. Or guilt. Just nerves. Because now it was real. No more heat-of-the-moment tension. No more whiskey haze. Now it was morning. And I had no idea what came next. I tried to shift out of bed quietly, but as soon as the mattress dipped, his eyes fluttered open. He looked at me, then at the room, and exhaled. Shit, not exactly the reaction I was hoping for. I froze mid-step, unsure if I should pretend I was just going to get water or lie and say, last night meant nothing. But he sat up, ran a hand through his hair, and then, after a pause, said, I didn't mean that the way it sounded. I turned back to him. How did you mean it? He rubbed his face and sighed. I meant, I don't do this. I don't mix personal and professional, especially not with someone I supervise. I stood there, wearing nothing but a pair of boxer briefs, and suddenly felt like I should cover up. But he wasn't looking at me like I'd done something wrong. Just like he didn't know what to do either. You're not fired, he added quickly, almost sheepishly. That made me crack a smile. Good to know. He looked around like he was trying to locate his shirt, or his dignity. We should probably talk about this. Yeah, I said, grabbing a t-shirt from the floor. Coffee first? His eyes flicked up to mine. Please. I padded into the kitchen while he sat on the edge of the bed, pulling his pants back on. There was something incredibly normal about that image. Domestic, even. And that might have been the most disorienting part of all. While the coffee brewed, I leaned on the counter, replaying everything from the night before. The way he touched me. The way I pulled him in like I'd been waiting for it for months. Maybe longer. David stepped into the kitchen a few minutes later, shirtless, but looking more composed. He sat at the small table and accepted the mug I handed him. I meant what I said, he said quietly. About your work. You're good at what you do. This, whatever this was, isn't going to change that. I sat across from him. You think it was just something? He looked at me for a long beat. I don't know. I'm trying not to think with the part of me that got in your bed last night. That made me laugh. Tired, amused, confused laughter. Okay, I said slowly. So what does that part of you want to say? He hesitated, then met my eyes again. It says I've wanted you for a while, that I kept telling myself it was nothing, just a stupid attraction. But last night wasn't just about the whiskey. It was something. I stared at him. I wanted to say the same thing. I wanted to tell him that I had thought about him too, maybe too much, that I noticed every time he leaned over my desk or lingered a second too long after meetings. That I didn't want this to be a one-time mistake we'd both pretend didn't happen. But I didn't say any of that, because I could feel the caution behind his words, the wall starting to go back up. What now? I asked, keeping my tone careful. David sat back, running a hand over his mouth. I don't know, he admitted. But whatever it is, it can't happen again. Not while we work together. I nodded, biting back the disappointment. I'd expected it, maybe even prepared for it. Still hurt, though. He stood, adjusted his shirt, and looked at me like he wanted to say more, but couldn't. Thanks for the coffee, he said. Then, after a beat, see you Monday. And just like that, he left. The door clicked shut behind him, and I was alone, again. The thing about trying to act normal around someone you've seen naked, someone who's whispered your name while grabbing your hips and pressing their mouth to your skin, is that it's impossible. No matter how professional you try to be, no matter how much coffee you drink before work to ground yourself, no matter how many deep breaths you take in the elevator before the doors open on your floor. David was already in when I arrived Monday morning. He looked up as I passed his office, gave a slight nod, then returned to his screen. It was like nothing had happened. Except something had happened, and now it sat between us like invisible smoke, curling through every interaction. Our morning meeting was short, focused. He called on me twice, kept his tone neutral. No smiles, no accidental eye contact that lingered too long. But the tension? That was still there, just under the surface. Tight and hot. By Wednesday, I was losing my mind. Every time he passed behind my chair, I tensed. Every time he said my name in front of the team, my heart beat a little too fast. I kept my distance, took lunch at weird hours, avoided being in the break room when he was in there. But Thursday screwed all that up. We had a client pitch that day. Big one. David and I were presenting together. I'd worked my ass off on the copy for the campaign, and he'd done the visuals. It was the kind of collaboration that normally came easy between us, syncing up without even needing to explain things. But this time, sitting next to him in a glass-walled conference room, side by side at the head of the table, I felt everything. His knee bumped mine under the table. Maybe on accident, maybe not. He didn't move it. I couldn't focus. My mouth felt dry every time I had to speak. I kept catching the scent of his cologne. Clean and warm, just like that night. The pitch went well. Great, actually. The client left smiling, already talking next steps. As the door closed behind them, David finally let out a breath beside me. "Nice work," he said, finally looking at me. It was the first thing he'd said to me directly, just the two of us, all week. I turned to face him. "You too," I said, trying not to read too much into the way he was looking at me. Focused, careful. But there was something else there too, something softer, warmer. For a moment, we just sat there. No one else in the room, no distractions, just silence. And that same charged air between us that had never really gone away. Then he stood. "Drinks tonight," he said, grabbing his tablet. "Whole team's going out after 5. You should come." I blinked. "You're going?" "I'm the boss," he said, like that explained everything. "It'd be weird if I didn't." I hesitated, but nodded. "Yeah, okay." He paused at the door like he wanted to say something more. Then walked out. That night, I went. I told myself it was just to keep appearances. Be social. Network. But when I got there and saw David already at the bar, sleeves rolled, drink in hand, laughing at something one of the junior designers said, I knew I was lying to myself again. Because the second his eyes found me across the room, something changed. Not a big shift, just subtle. But I saw it. He made his way toward me about 20 minutes in, waited until no one was hovering too close, handed me a drink, and leaned in just enough to be heard over the music. "Glad you came." I swallowed hard, avoiding his eyes. "Yeah, well, you're very persuasive." His mouth twitched like he wanted to smile, but didn't. "Can we talk?" he asked. My pulse jumped. "Here?" He shook his head. "Not here." And just like that, we were doing it again. Leaving together. No words. Just an unspoken current pulling us both. We stepped outside into the cool night, the noise of the bar muffled behind the heavy door. "You live nearby?" he asked. 10 minutes. "Walk?" I nodded, already moving. We walked in silence. The streets were mostly empty. The only sound was our footsteps and the occasional car passing. I could feel his presence beside me. Warm. Steady. Just like that night a week ago. But this wasn't drunk and impulsive. This was deliberate. When we reached my building, I stopped just outside the door. I turned to him. "Are you really coming up with me again?" I asked. His eyes didn't flinch. "Yes." And this time, when we kissed, it wasn't rushed. It was slow, certain, and we both knew it wasn't going to stop at one night. Not this time. We didn't talk much after we got inside. David followed me up the stairs and through my front door like he'd done it 100 times, like he belonged there. There was no hesitation this time, no awkward dance around what it meant. He set his keys down on the counter like it was nothing, like this was routine now. I stood across from him in the kitchen, heart thudding, pretending to fuss with the coffee mugs left in the sink just to give my hands something to do. The silence hung between us, thick, charged. "You want something to drink?" I asked, my voice way too casual for what we both knew was about to happen. He shook his head, eyes on me. "No, just you." It was simple, direct. But the way he said it made my chest squeeze tight. I turned around, and in the next second, he was kissing me. Everything about this was different than the first time. Slower, but more intense. Like we'd both spent the whole week holding our breath, and we're finally letting it out all at once. His hands found my waist. Mine found his shirt. We moved through the apartment like we couldn't get close enough, couldn't get our clothes off fast enough, but also couldn't stop touching each other long enough to actually get there. He guided me backward down the hallway, fingers tangled in the hem of my t-shirt. I nearly tripped over my own shoes, laughing into his mouth before he caught me and pushed me gently against the wall. "You okay?" he murmured against my jaw. "Yeah," I whispered. "I'm good. Better now." He kissed me again, slower this time. His hands on either side of my face, steadying me. And I swear, for a second, it felt like we were more than just a mistake happening twice. It felt like something else entirely. We made it to the bedroom eventually, half undressed and completely out of breath. And when he laid me down and crawled in beside me, it wasn't frantic. It was careful, deliberate, like he was finally letting himself do what he'd wanted to do for a long time. The rest of the night blurred in the best kind of way. Heat, skin, breath, that soft groan he made when I kissed his throat, the way his hands gripped my thighs when I pulled him closer. And later, much later, when it was all quiet again, he stayed. That was the part that got me. He stayed. I woke up around 3 a.m., tucked under his arm, our legs tangled beneath the sheets. His chest rose and fell steadily, his breath warm against my hair. I just lay there, staring into the dark, trying to make sense of the chaos in my head. Because here was the truth. I wanted this. Him. But I also knew we couldn't keep doing this, and pretending it wasn't complicated. And judging by the way he held me in his sleep, I wasn't the only one struggling with that. The next morning, he woke up before me. When I opened my eyes, I could hear the sound of water running in the bathroom. His phone was charging on my nightstand. His shirt was draped over my desk chair. His cologne still hung in the air. It felt like he lived here, and for a second, I let myself imagine what that would be like. David stepped out of the bathroom a few minutes later, toweling off his face. When he saw I was awake, he gave me this small, tired smile. "Morning. Hey." Neither of us moved. It was like the reality of morning light had shifted something. He sat on the edge of the bed, fingers laced together. "We need to talk," he said. I pushed myself up, pillow tucked behind my back. "Yeah, I know." He looked over at me. Not cold, not distant, but serious. "I don't want to stop seeing you," he said, "but we need to be smart about this." "Smart how?" He took a breath. "No one at work can know. Not yet. Maybe not ever, depending on how things go. And we have to set boundaries. Clear ones." I nodded slowly, trying to hide the sting of that. "Okay." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I know it's not fair. I'm not trying to keep you a secret. You have a lot more to lose." I finished for him. He gave me a grateful look. "Yeah." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "So what are we then? Just seeing each other in secret? Meet at a convenient time?" His silence made my chest ache. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "But I know I don't want this to be just a one-time thing. Or even a two-time thing." That made me smile, despite myself. "So a third time is already on your calendar?" "Maybe," he said, finally smiling back. "If you're not sick of me by then." I shook my head, feeling the tension ease just a little. "I'm not," I said softly. "Not even close." He leaned over and kissed me again. Slow. Gentle. Then stood and started gathering his things. "I'll see you at work." And just like that, we had a rule book we never meant to write. No public affection. No texting during the day, unless it was strictly work-related. No sleeping over twice in 1 week. No one could know. But the one rule we didn't say out loud, the one that scared me the most, was the one that felt like it was already forming in the quiet between us. Don't fall. For a couple of weeks, we actually stuck to the rules. We saw each other twice, once at my place, once at his, always late, always quiet, never overnight. At work we were careful, no lingering glances, no private smiles, just clipped, professional exchanges like nothing had ever happened. Except everything had, and trying to pretend otherwise was like trying to bottle a storm. Because every time I passed his office and caught a glimpse of him leaning over his desk, sleeves rolled, brow furrowed, I remembered what those hands felt like on me. What that mouth sounded like when he said my name in the dark. What it meant when he stayed just long enough for me to start thinking maybe he didn't want to leave. I was losing sleep. Not from stress, from want. Because now I knew what it was like to be wanted by him, and I couldn't unknow it. Then one night, things came to a head. We hadn't seen each other in over a week, not for lack of trying. He'd been slammed with meetings. I'd had to travel for a 2-day client shoot. We kept it light over text, mostly jokes. A few check-ins, nothing that would raise eyebrows if someone ever scrolled too far. But that Friday, we were both back in the office. And something was different. Maybe it was the way his eyes tracked me when he didn't think I was looking. Or the way he happened to stand closer during our team sync, his hand brushing mine when he passed me a tablet. Or maybe it was just the tension. The backlog of everything we hadn't touched or said in 8 days. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I messaged him. "Can we talk?" He replied, "Conference room C. 10 minutes. When I walked in, he was already there, leaning against the window, arms crossed. I shut the door behind me. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me. Then he said, "This isn't working." The words hit harder than I expected. What isn't? This us, trying to keep it casual, controlled, it's not. I didn't know what to say, because he was right. I hadn't stopped thinking about him, and judging by the way his jaw was clenched, neither had he. "Then what do we do?" I asked. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. He stepped closer. Not touching, but close enough that I felt him. "You tell me. Because I can't keep pretending this is just physical, or convenient. It's not." He took another step. "I miss you." That undid me, because I'd been trying not to feel that exact thing. "David," I started, but my voice cracked. He reached for me then, handcuffing the back of my neck, and pulled me in. His mouth found mine like it had been waiting, starving, aching. I kissed him back, hard, because I didn't know how else to say me too. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. "I can't stay away from you," he said. "But I also can't risk everything just because I don't want to follow the rules." "So don't," I said before I could stop myself. He blinked. "What?" I swallowed. "Don't follow the rules. Not all of them. Not the ones that say we can't be more than what we are." He exhaled, shook his head. "If people find out, then they find out." He looked at me like I was insane. Maybe I was. But I kept going. "You want me. I want you. This isn't some office fling. This is—" "I know what it is," he interrupted. We stood in silence for a beat. Then he said, "I don't want to hide anymore." My heart leapt. "But if we're going to do this," he added, "we have to be smart. Still careful, but honest, with each other at least." I nodded. "Deal?" He leaned in, kissed me one more time, softer now, like a promise. Then he stepped back, adjusted his tie, and smirked. "You have 3 emails to reply to, and a campaign deck to finish. Are you seriously giving me work right now?" He opened the door, that smirk still lingering. "Boss's orders." And just like that, we went back to work. But it wasn't the same. Because now we weren't just sneaking around. Now we were something more. By the following week, the rules we had tried so hard to maintain didn't exist anymore. We didn't talk about it, didn't need to. The boundaries had melted under the heat of everything we hadn't allowed ourselves to feel before. Every glance, every touch, every lingering brush of hands was a deliberate choice. It started small. A hand on the small of my back when we passed in the hallway. A quick brush against my arm when he handed me a printout. But the tension under those touches was electric. Charged. The kind of electricity that made every fiber of your body alert and alive. One night, David stayed late under the guise of catching up on revisions. The office was empty except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft click of our keyboards. I sat at my desk, pretending to be focused while feeling his presence behind me, leaning just close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him. He cleared his throat. "Do you want to step outside for a minute?" I didn't hesitate. I followed him to the roof access, the emergency exit door creaking softly as we emerged into the cold night air. The city sprawled beneath us in lights, neon and amber, reflecting off the glass towers. We leaned against the railing, shoulder to shoulder, and for a moment, the world fell away. "I hate keeping this a secret," he whispered, his breath cold against my ear. I turned to him. His eyes were dark in the shadows, full of that intensity that always left me breathless. "I know. Me too." Before I could stop myself, I reached up, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. His hand caught mine, holding it there for just a beat too long. Then he leaned in. This kiss was different. Not cautious, not slow. It was demanding, desperate even, as if we had both been starving for this connection for years. His hand slid down my arms, wrapping around me, and I pressed against him, feeling his body respond to mine in ways I hadn't thought possible. We stayed there for what felt like hours, bodies pressed together, hands exploring, breaths mingling. Each touch, each kiss, was a reaffirmation that what we had between us was undeniable. Eventually we had to move. The cool night air reminded us that this wasn't a private apartment, that reality waited below. But even as we walked back inside, the heat of our connection lingered. Every step, every brush of arms was charged with the electricity of knowing we were crossing lines that could never be uncrossed. Back at my desk, I caught him watching me over his monitor. I gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile, and he returned it with one that said everything. We were bound together now, in a secret that made every moment, every glance, every touch even more intoxicating. By the time we left the office that night, walking side by side to the car, the tension had changed. It wasn't just about desire anymore. It was about something deeper, something neither of us could name yet. And as I slid into the passenger seat and felt his hand brush against mine, I realized that no rule, no professional boundary could contain what we'd become. And truthfully, I didn't want them to. It was late Friday night. The office was quiet. Everyone else had gone home. David and I were still in the conference room, pretending to be catching up on some campaign notes. The lights were dim, casting long shadows across the polished table. Every time our eyes met, the air between us thickened. I couldn't take it anymore. The teasing, the holding back, the stolen touches in hallways, it was all too much. I pushed my chair back and stood, closing the distance between us. "You're impossible," I whispered. He smirked, leaning against the edge of the table. "I could say the same thing about you." And then, without another word, we kissed. This time, it wasn't tentative. It was urgent, raw, the culmination of every stolen glance. Every night we'd spent thinking about each other. Every suppressed desire that had built up since the first night in my apartment. His hands were everywhere, through my hair, down my back, gripping my hips. I responded in kind, pressing against him, feeling the heat of him radiating through his shirt. The lines between boss and employee didn't exist anymore. They couldn't. Not in that moment. We moved toward the lounge area, knocking over a chair in our haste. The sounds of our own breathing and whispered names filled the room. Every touch, every kiss, every graze of skin felt like it was igniting us both from the inside out. David paused for a second, pulling back just enough to look at me. His eyes were dark, intense, full of need. "I shouldn't be doing this," he said, voice low. "Not here. Not now." I cupped his face in my hands. "I don't care," I said. "I don't want you to care. I want this." That was the final permission he needed. We didn't stop. Every kiss, every touch, every whispered promise made the office feel smaller, hotter, more intimate. Time lost all meaning. Hours later, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell anymore. We collapsed onto the couch, sweaty, breathless, tangled in each other. The city outside continued its constant hum, indifferent to what had just happened. David rested his head against my shoulder. "We're going to have to figure out work," he murmured. I nodded, resting my cheek on his hair. "Yeah, but right now, this is ours." He let out a long sigh. "It feels like it's always been ours. I just didn't know how to admit it." I smiled, closing my eyes. "Me neither. But we don't have to hide anymore. Not from each other." For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. Dangerous? Yes. Complicated? Absolutely. But worth it? Without question. We stayed there until the early hours, talking, laughing softly, running our hands over each other, letting the world fade away until it was just the two of us and the undeniable bond we had finally allowed ourselves to embrace. When morning came, we dressed, went our separate ways, and returned to work. But nothing was the same. The tension remained, yes, but it was now mingled with the knowledge that we had crossed a line neither of us would ever regret. We had broken the rules, yes, but in doing so, we'd discovered something far more important, the truth of what we wanted, and the courage to claim it. And for both of us, that was worth every risk.